Hello and welcome to Coffee, Crochet, and Unsolved Murders. I'm your host, Stacy, and today we'll be talking about unsolved murders while we crochet our projects and drink our coffee. Yes, it's cold coffee today, and my choice of cold coffee is Black Rifle Coffee Company, Caramel Vanilla, Espresso 300. It is made with MCT oil. I do not have any sponsors, but I love this coffee. I love what the company stands for, and the taste is phenomenal, and it gives me that MCT oil that I need. And I'm drinking cold coffee because it is 100 plus hell outside, and it's just too hot for hot coffee. So therefore, cold coffee day. But let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. So grab your crochet project, which I am still working on the blanket I started last episode, because let's be honest, I have not had time to pick up the crochet hook until today. So we're going to continue on with whatever projects we're working on, and we're going to talk about unsolved murder. Today's episode is episode 3. We'll be talking about the Villisca axe murders. Now, if you know from my previous episodes, I will butcher names. I don't mean to, but it happens. Okay? So, this is a very sad, horrible crime, and it does involve children, so if you don't want to listen, you don't have to, but I'm not going to delve into too much of what happened to the kids. There is a little part that I do have to go into, but most of the damage was done to the adults, so just a heads up. But I'll try to get through what happened to the kids quickly. Okay. I'm a mom of 4 and a grandma, and believe me, it's not fun, but it's what happened, and let's get into it. The Villisca axe murders. This has happened in Villisca, Iowa. On June 9th through June 10th of 1912 is the date that this happened. The victims were Josiah, who was 43, and Sarah, 39. Their last names were Moore, and they had 4 children. Herman was 11, Mary Catherine was 10, Arthur Boyd was 7, and Paul Vernon was 5. Now that's 6 members of the family, plus they had 2 visiting children there. The kids that were visiting were friends of the kids in the family, and they were Ina May, who was 8, and Lena Gertrude, who was 11. Their last names were Stillinger. They just happened to be spending the night on the night this happened. Okay. The night of the murders, the family and friends went to the Presbyterian Church for a Children's Day program. Now, the Children's Day program was coordinated by Sarah Moore, so she was involved with that. The program ended around 9:30 p.m. The family then went home. They arrived back to the Moore's house between 9:45 and 10 p.m., somewhere around that time frame. That was the last time anybody saw the parents or the children or the friends alive. Now, the next morning, around approximately 7 a.m., the neighbor, Mary Peckham, becomes concerned because the family didn't come out and do their daily chores. This was 1912. The family had chores, and they were usually out fairly early doing said chores. Okay, so she got concerned because she didn't see anybody. Nobody came out. Nobody was working on the property. She goes to the door. She knocks. No answer whatsoever. She doesn't hear anything, sees nothing, no movement. She proceeds to go let the chickens out because that's one of the chores is the chickens. So she lets the chickens out for them. And then she goes and she contacts Josiah's brother. And his name was Ross. Okay, Ross Moore. So she goes and she contacts him and she says, it's odd, hey, nobody's answering, nothing's being done, I haven't seen them, nobody's been out of the house. So Ross gets concerned and he goes over, he knocks, he hollers, nothing, no noise, nothing. So he uses the spare key to get in the house because he obviously knows where the spare key is. So he uses the spare key to get in the house. Now, mind you, remember, doors are locked at this point that they've seen, that the front door is locked. He goes inside while Miss Peckham stays outside on the threshold. And so he goes inside. And at that point, as he goes into the parlor area or this second bedroom parlor, whatever, it's been called two different things, a parlor and a second bedroom, like a guest bedroom. And he finds the bodies of the two little Stillinger girls, Lena and Ina. He tells Mary Peckham to go call the police, go call the peace officer. So he does. And so Ina and Lena are the first ones, but he doesn't venture anymore into the house. He waits for the authorities to get there. And this is 1912, small town Iowa, so we have Henry Hank Horton, and he's the primary peace officer for the town. Don't know if they called him the chief or what they called him, but he was noted as the primary peace officer. Horton goes in to investigate the rest of the house and see, you've got two dead bodies and you can't find the rest of the family. So he goes in, he looks around, he finds the bodies of the Moore family, the rest of the Moore family. So he finds the rest of the Moore family dead. They had all been bludgeoned to death with an axe. The axe was found. The axe was left leaning against the wall. It was left in the parlor with the Stillinger girls, so they ultimately figured out that those were the last two victims. So they were the last two killed. It makes you wonder why, why did they have to kill the little girls? Why did they have to kill any of them? But, you're leaving. If you're leaving, why do you have to kill them? Maybe we'll find out. Okay, so this is kind of a long one. Now, the axe they determined belonged to Josiah. So it wasn't that this person or people brought in the murder weapon. This was Josiah's axe. So they had got it out of the barn. The doctors determined that the time of death was between midnight and 5 a.m. So somewhere after they arrived back from church and 5 a.m. in the morning is when the murders took place. There were reports that as they searched the house, there was two cigarettes that they found in the attic, and the family didn't smoke. Nobody in the family smoked. So these two cigarettes in the attic shouldn't have been there. Okay, so one theory is the person was hiding in the attic until the family went to sleep. They believe that the murder started in the master bedroom, because obviously you're going to get rid of whoever is strong enough to fight back, right? So you're going to go for the adults first. If you're a murderer, you're going to go for the people who can fight back first. So the murder started in the master bedroom, and Josiah is murdered with the sharp side of the axe. He's the only one of the victims that was murdered with the sharp side of the axe. He was hit so hard that his eyes, you couldn't tell his eyes were there. And he was hit multiple times. They even found gouge marks on the ceiling from where the person took the axe, lifted it up, and came back down on Josiah. Now this is how brutal this man was murdered with an axe. This is how horrendously brutal this was. When it came to Sarah and the rest of the victims, they were bludgeoned with the blunt side of the axe. So you know the two sides. There's the sharp side and there's the blunt side. Well, they used the blunt side on everybody else, but they used the blade on Josiah, on the dad. Don't know if they figured, that was a quick way to get him out of the way. Kind of not sure if they started with him first and then went after Sarah, and if Sarah woke up. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that at this point. After murdering Josiah and Sarah, they then went in and to each of the kids, and they believe that they started with the oldest child and worked their way down upstairs. And they go do all that. Now I'm wondering if they didn't know if the other two girls were downstairs, because they go back after they kill the kids. This person or persons, if it was multiple, go back to the master bedroom and continue to inflict more hits to Josiah. And they know they went back into the bedroom because apparently they knocked over a shoe that had filled with blood from the first start of the attack. So they accidentally knock over the shoe, the blood spills out. So they know that at this point they had went back in, because then the shoe wouldn't have been filled with blood had it been knocked over before the killings. So that's kind of a given that they went back in. So then this murderer or murderers, could be singular or plural, they don't know at this point. They don't really know a whole lot at this point. All they know is they've got a dead family and dead friends. Okay. Now, after that, they went downstairs, not sure if they were leaving, and noticed the girls. But at this point, they go into the parlor or guest bedroom, whatever you want to call it, where the two girls were. They believe that Ina was killed first because she was still laying in the bed, like she would have been if she was asleep. Lena, on the other hand, Lena had woke up because she had defensive wounds. This little girl fought for her life. She had defensive wounds. Ultimately, though, the person was just too much. But the way they placed her body, and it just makes me so mad. They placed her body crossways across the bed. So I don't know if she landed that way or if they placed her specifically that way, but her pajama bottoms were pulled down. So she was exposed, and she was set up like she had been sexually molested. However, upon examination, that had not happened. But it makes you wonder why they put her in that position to make people think that she was. After the murders were done, there was, and this is what's odd, I didn't get a lot of information if they had wiped the blade. I believe that they did, and you'll find out why I think that after the fact. But I believe that they wiped the axe, left it propped up in the room. But then they proceeded to go into the kitchen and take 4 pounds of bacon, a 4-pound slab of bacon, and set it next to the axe. When they checked the kitchen out, they did find untouched food on the table, a plate of food, untouched, and bloody water on the table. And I can't find anywhere where that was, where they looked into that evidence too much. But here was some crazy stuff. So the evidence showed about the bacon. But all the mirrors in the house were covered. They were covered with blankets. They were covered with clothes that had been brought out of the rooms, out of the closets. That all the mirrors in the house were covered. And now, in some of the stuff that I have seen, they covered mirrors when people died back then. And I don't know if it's certain religions, and if somebody wants to comment on that and explain that to me. But back then, in those times, that was something that they did when people died, I believe, was they stopped the clocks at the time of death. So like if you had a grandfather clock, they would stop the clock at the time of death, and they would cover the mirrors. And I'm not too sure why, if it was a religious thing or what they felt. Because, you know, they had a lot of, back in those days, they had a lot of different beliefs as far as, you know, spirits and things like that. So I'm going to leave that there because I don't know. I don't understand the significance of it, but you're going to know that there is a significance to it as we get further in. After the murders and after the search, people started swarming into the house. Now, in Iowa back then, in Villisca, Iowa, they had a phone system. They had a central telephone office. And when the murders, when it was found out about the murders, and this was roughly about an hour and a half after the bodies were found, this telephone office sent out a call to every house in Villisca, Iowa, about the murder. Within minutes, the crime scene was inundated with townsfolk who were allowed to go into the house and touch the murder weapon. Not only that, this is just crazy. Sheriff could not get control of the situation. Okay. People were taking, and this is so disgusting, people were taking pieces of Josiah's skull as souvenirs. So this stuff, this has been going on for years. Okay. People just trying to get in. And I know we talked about before evidence and how things are handled, how evidence, they can find out more on the evidence now than they could back then because there's no testing and any of that. Well, even if it was tested, how will they know? Because the crime scene was contaminated, because they lost control of the crime scene from the get-go. Okay, an hour and a half into this, crime scene's tainted. When the coroner arrived, and he got there I want to say close to 9 a.m. So all this is happening within a few hours of the bodies being found. So around 9 a.m. the coroner gets there. He's pissed. He's upset because he's looking at all these people traipsing through the crime scene. He hasn't gotten to the bodies yet. And yet the whole freaking town is there. Like, looky-loos. And rightfully so, he's upset. He pulled the sheriff aside, told him, hey, you need to call in the National Guard and get this under control because we can't do our job like this. And not that that was his words verbatim, but, you know, he's upset. He's telling him, call in the National Guard. By 10:30 a.m., National Guard was in place and got control of everything. So this is 3.5 hours after the bodies are found. Okay, it's just crazy. So you've got a whole time span of 3.5 hours until they can finally really start investigating, and that takes time. By the time they got through the scene, looked at the bodies, had permission to remove the bodies, it wasn't until approximately 2 a.m. on June 11th that they actually got to remove the bodies from the home. So you're going almost 24 hours after the bodies are found, and you're finally getting them out of the house. That's when they could actually do the search. So the good search that they could do, they found more. They found the 2 cigarette butts in the attic. They also found a gas lamp. And the gas lamp, the wick was very low, and the glass had been taken out so as that it wouldn't emit a huge light, like people couldn't see the light from the gas lamp. And when they went to the barn, they found where there was a depression in the hay next to a knothole that you could look like somebody had laid there and watched through the knothole, watch the house. They also, in the house, they found a fragment of a keychain, and that was found downstairs, but it didn't belong to anybody that was in the home. So that was something else that they had found while doing the search. So on June 11th, they had the limited investigation that they had. They finished that, and the coroner's inquiry was on June 11th, and 13 potential witnesses were all questioned on June 11th. That is what happened leading from the murders leading up to investigation. So here we have it. So we're going to run down. You've got 8 people murdered, 6 of them children, brutally with an axe. 1 girl's body situated to make it look like she had been sexually assaulted, which she had not. Untouched food and bloody water on the table, and mirrors covered by whatever they could find to cover the mirrors. Obviously the family didn't do that. If the family wanted to cover the mirrors, then they knew what they had and they covered the mirrors. Okay, I'm just putting that out there. There are multiple suspects. So now we've gone through the murder. Let's go through the suspect list. Suspect number 1 was Andrew Sawyer. Now, Andrew Sawyer was a transient. He was questioned but not charged. Things that they had going for them against Andrew were that he was obsessed with the murders. He slept fully clothed as if he was ready to bolt anytime. And he slept with an axe. Let's go through Andrew. Andrew's a transient one. Okay. First people they're going to look at 1912 is probably transient. And if he's a transient, he's going to sleep fully clothed. Whether or not he's getting ready to run or he's just sleeping. And him sleeping with an axe, why did he use Josiah's if he had his own? Was he smart enough to know don't use your own shit to murder somebody? I don't know. If my gut is that he didn't have anything to do with it. They were just grasping because he was transient. Unless there was more that they had on him, I don't know. But he was questioned. He was not charged. So let's move away from suspect number 1. Suspect number 2, Reverend George Kelly. Now, Reverend George Kelly was a traveling minister who it was found later that he had mental illness. He had a mental illness. But Reverend Kelly was working with the children's daycare program that Sarah had coordinated. He was at the church that night. He knew the Moores, had to have known the Moores, and I'm sure he probably knew the Stillinger children because if he's part of that church, then you're going to know your parishioners. The weird thing about him is he left town June 10th between 5 a.m. and 5:50. Up and left town before the bodies were found. He had some past things that he had gotten in trouble for. He got in trouble for being a peeping Tom. And he also got in trouble for asking young girls and women to pose nude for him. And the good Reverend Kelly was charged because he admitted in court that he did it. You'd think case closed, right? He admits to doing it. Mental issues. They didn't believe him. Though he became increasingly obsessed with the crime and wrote many letters to the police, the investigators, and the victims' families. And private investigators decided to write back because they thought, okay, this person, let's see what he tells us. So the private investigators wrote him back, asking him, telling him, hey, if what you're saying is true, we need details. Give us details. Guess what? Old Reverend Kelly gave him details. He gave them details. But he said he was a witness. At that point, he said that he was a witness to it, not that he actually did it. So he's changing it to I did it, to I was a witness to it. I heard noises. So at this point, they don't know whether he's telling the truth or if he's imagining things. So he doesn't get arrested. He doesn't get arrested. He's not found guilty for the murders. But he, however, is arrested on different charges, and investigators always believe that he could have done it. Just, they can prove it. His stories kept being all over the place. Suspect number 3. There's almost as many suspects as there was victims. Let's just put this out there. And I think that the law enforcement was grasping at straws at this point, just trying to find out who did it. Frank Jones. Now he's suspect number 3. He was an Iowa State senator and he lived in Villisca. Josiah had worked for him at an implement store until Josiah chose to leave and open his own business. And he opened his own store and he took customers away from Frank Jones, which I'm sure ticked him off. I know I owned a business at one point. I've owned a couple of businesses, but the last business I owned, I was the first one to have the type of business that I had. It's kind of an all-in-one. And then another person opened right down the street from me, similar type of business. Mind you, it pisses you off. But at no point in time did murder cross my mind. However, this is 1912. These are men involved. And this is a state senator who probably thought, hey, you're going up against me? One of the businesses that Josiah took from Senator Jones was a lucrative John Deere dealership. And I'm sure old Mr. Senator wasn't happy, especially that one was taken away from him. He also had a thing against Josiah because he believed Josiah had an affair with his daughter-in-law, so with his son's wife. That was never found to be true. That was strictly rumor. Nobody ever found that to be true. So we can't say whether or not Josiah did have an affair, cheat on Sarah with the daughter-in-law of the senator. Senator Jones was never arrested, never tried, but he was a suspect and he was questioned. The next suspect kind of has a tie to Senator Jones. Senator Jones. So let's get started on suspect number 4, William Mansfield, also known as William Insane Blackie Mansfield. Okay, he was an ex-con, former Army soldier, and he was stationed at Fort Leavenworth. So he was in the area. Some believe that he was hired by Senator Jones to murder the Moore family. I don't know. And the reason why I say I don't know is, why would the senator hire somebody to do this and take out the whole family? If he just wanted to take out Josiah, why not just take out Josiah? Why go after the wife and kids because you believe the man did something or he took business away from you? So suffer the whole family? I don't know. That one I'm kind of not sure if I buy either. However, let's talk about William, all right? 9 months before the Villisca murders, there was a similar axe murder case in Colorado Springs, Colorado. After that, there were 2 more axe murders in Ellensworth, Kansas, and Paola, Kansas. There were numerous other axe murders along the Southern Pacific Railroad from 1911 to 1912, and also the Axeman of New Orleans killings, along with several other murders, axe murders. Okay, so they believe that this William Insane Blackie Mansfield was the axe murderer of these other ones because of the area that it was in. The one murder that was similar to the Moores was the Colorado Springs murder, because in that one they left the axe. We're going back to when I said there was some other things going on. So the axe being wiped down and left in the home, So the axe was left in the home. I didn't find where the axe was belonged to the people who were murdered or not. Um, but when the bodies were found on this murder, the mirrors in the home were all covered. Axes, the murder weapon is found, propped up in the house, and the mirrors are covered with whatever they could find. Clothes, blankets, whatever. All the mirrors were covered. In the other murders, Mansfield was believed to have committed many more axe murders across different states, but after a long investigation, Mansfield was arrested, but released because he gave them an alibi. He sued the investigator, so Mansfield, murderer Mansfield, or suspected murderer Mansfield, sued the investigator and won $2,225 because he said he was falsely accused. Somebody who with the nickname Insane Blackie won a case against an investigator because he felt he was falsely accused. And apparently it proved it in order to win. Now, down the road, as through their investigation, they found a restaurant owner who identified Mansfield the morning after the Villisca murders and saw him getting on a train close by. Now, if that's true, Mansfield's alibi that he gave is null and void. Apparently, they can never prove it. There was another witness that came forward that said she overheard three men talking in the woods about plotting the murders of the Moore family before the killings. Apparently that didn't come of anything either. Suspect number 5. And we're not done. Suspect number 5 was Henry Lee Moore. Now, Henry Lee Moore was not related to the victims. Same last name, not related. And he had killed his mother and his grandmother with an axe. And he was a suspect in the other axe murders, the same as Mansfield. Nothing ever came of that one either. Now, I'm kind of thinking that we are, I don't know, grasping at everybody who might have used an axe to murder somebody as a potential suspect. Just saying. Because there's no evidence other than the use of an axe. Just like the first suspect, number 1, who slept with an axe. Didn't say he had ever used the axe on anybody or anything, but he slept with an axe for protection. And I'm assuming because he's transient. They do that now. If they have a weapon, they're going to sleep with it so that nobody takes their stuff, right? Right. So that was suspect number 5, Henry Lee Moore. Nothing ever came of that one. As far as the Moore family murders, he was not charged. He was questioned. He was not charged. Again, still questioned, because he did use an axe to murder his own mother and grandmother, which, sorry, you got other mental issues going on there too if you're murdering your family. Which, again, he was not related to the Moores at all. They just shared a same last name. Suspect number 6. We're almost to the end of the suspect list. I promise. Suspect number 6 was Samuel E. Moyer. Now, this was Josiah's brother-in-law. So we're going into the actual family. Okay? His brother-in-law often threatened to kill Josiah. He had an alibi. It just seems like everybody who has an alibi, though, has an alibi that they could, if they checked real hard, they might be able to break the alibi. Though it doesn't, I never could find out what his alibi was, but he did have an alibi for the time of the murder, so that took him off the list. We're down to the last suspect. Paul Miller. And the spelling of his last name is Mueller, but it is pronounced Miller. He was a German immigrant. Now this one was more, they thought this was a more decent theory of what happened. He was an immigrant suspected of murdering a family in Massachusetts who employed him on their farm. There was a manhunt that was done looking for Paul Miller, and they never found him. Though the span of time between the two murders, the murder that he was accused of happened in 1897, and then the murders in Iowa were in 1912. Now that's a long time span to have, you murder one family that you're working for, if that was the case. And they suspected him of it. Manhunt never finds him. So then you're going to go from 1897 to 1912, and then you're going to randomly murder this family. There was nothing saying that he knew the family. There was nothing saying that the family had employed him. There was nothing. But they felt that this was a decent theory. This theory, though, did not come up till, I want to say, 2017. And this was a theory from some people who were actually writing about the case. And they went through their own investigation and were looking at scenarios and different suspects, and they came across Mr. Paul Miller. Again, this is 2000. I believe it was 2017. I could be wrong on that, but I know it was in the 2000s. So there are people still talking about this case. That is the last of the suspect list. So there are 7 suspects. One came up over 100 years later. But though there were two people arrested and charged. One was found not guilty, and another one was not enough evidence. So nobody was there. They had arrests, no charges, no convictions. Nobody was ever convicted of these murders. The house, and I believe I'm not really sure of the year. I think it was in the 90s. A couple bought the house, and there had been modifications. The house had been brought, more modern. The last couple that purchased the home that I could find, purchased the home in the 90s. They redid the house to what it originally was in 1912. Open it up. They give tours, and you can actually spend the night in the house that they claim is haunted because of what happened. And as a former paranormal investigator for 10 years, I will say that the possibility of it being haunted could be, you have a traumatic experience happen in the home, spirits don't go the way they're supposed to, whether you believe it or not. I personally would love to go stay at that house and see if there's any experiences that come from it. But here, my dear subscribers and my dear watchers, here's some questions that maybe you can answer. The two people that were tried but not convicted, why? Let's compare the evidence of what I found and why nobody believed them. You've got a mental issue with one. B, you've got an alibi for the other. But did you do enough police work to try to discredit the alibis? Like, you had two people with alibis. Did you, at any point, how far did you go to discredit those alibis and make sure that they did? Or did, because the one person sued and won, did you just not want to deal with it? Because, shit, if we don't catch it this time, what are we going to do? Double jeopardy has always been a thing. So once somebody is found not guilty, you can't try them for it again. And it doesn't matter if it was the 1800s, 1900s, or now. Double jeopardy's always been a thing. Okay? My other question is, why kill the kids? Is it because Lena woke up? But unless the screaming woke the kids up, but the kids were in bed. They were murdered in their beds. So obviously, the ones upstairs didn't wake up. So if the ones upstairs didn't wake up, that goes to show maybe the ones downstairs didn't wake up either until maybe they heard a noise. And is it a possibility that the untouched food in the kitchen was actually Lena, who had gotten up maybe to get something to eat? And that's when they found that the two girls were downstairs. Another question is, why cover the mirrors? I know that I believe there to be something in old wives' tales or a religious reason or something that they covered the mirrors when people died. I just don't understand that. So if somebody out there who's watching this, leave it in the comments so, we can figure it out. And my last question, and this bothered me when I first heard it, why put the 4-pound slab of bacon next to the axe? That could go back to somebody being a pig, and maybe the suspect of Senator Jones, or somebody being hired by him to commit the murders, because he took business away from his former boss, and that was his way of being called a pig and greedy, because he took business away from his boss. How close do you guys think I am to that one? Unfortunately, we'll probably never know. But we can always remember it. And I'm curious. I someday would like to go to Villisca, Iowa, and tour the house. Take a tour of the house. Now, I did read that in the tour, they don't mention the 2 cigarette butts being found in the attic. So I don't know if they don't know if that's true or not, so they don't add that to the tour, or if they just didn't put it out there. But in everything else I've read, the 2 cigarette butts were actually found. That leads to, did they look into who smoked, who were smokers? And I don't know if they had brands, if it was a cigarette with brands on it, or if it was, because back in the day, and I know my great-grandfather and my grandfather smoked, but they rolled their own cigarettes, so that's a possibility too. So, you know, it's hard to say. But that is our episode for today. This is the longest one yet, you guys. I hope you stuck with me. I know this is all new, and I apologize for it being kind of I don't know. I'm new. I'm technology challenged. So this is my way of bringing you Coffee, Crochet, and Unsolved Murder. Again, I'm Stacy, and we'll see you next time for episode 4. You guys have a great day. Enjoy your coffee. Keep crocheting, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye now.